Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Was that better, Will?
Yes.
All right, everybody. Hey,
better.
welcome to episode 11, right? That's 2 1 side by side, or as Jake likes to say, 10 plus 1. Is that correct, Jake?
Simple math. I'm a simple guy. I like
shoe.
simple math.
Yeah, way too much homeschooling, bro. Like that's the one thing I know. So welcome to Security Matters with Coffee Squad. We're glad to have you back. We appreciate you. We love you. Some of you, not all of you. Well, except for that guy right there, like you. I see you. Yeah, we care about you. So today we're going to talk a little bit about thermal imaging and honestly, a little bit about Jake. Why? Because his hair is out of control. Jake, help me out, man. Look at him.
I don't have any hair.
Can't even.
Look at that. Completely bald.
So we're going to talk again, thermal imaging and really COVID-19 and businesses opening. So we all have kind of our personal opinions on what this is going to look like, but we really want to get into this. You know, we need to look into the future now and see kind of what we need to do from a security standpoint. So we'll kind of go over that. We're going to talk a little bit about what we all drink. Jake, water, not really sure what's happening to him, but he used to be a really heavy drinker of coffee, but now he's, all he drinks is, foo-foo water. Jake, do you have any response to that?
I can't.
Inquiring minds want to know.
You just crushed me, Ray. On air in front of everyone. No, I've never been a coffee drinker, which is so funny. I never acquired the taste for it. It smells great. I think it tastes like crap unless you put unless it's like Will and his foo-foo coffee drinks where it's like,
drink it black.
Soy milk, no froth,
Drink it
no
black.
foam, a little extra caramel drizzle on top,
Oh, that's great.
I just can't do that. So
I like my coffee like my soul. It's nice and black. Nothing in it.
No, look, man.
we can go a whole nother direction with that, Will.
Okay, first off, Will, your nickname is Care Bear, so pretty positive your soul's not black. I'm kidding, everybody.
All
It's
right,
not.
easy there, my little pony.
So we're going to go over some of the drinks. We're going to do some questions of the week like we always do with everybody. We're going to talk about our favorite articles this week, and then we're really going to dive pretty deep into the thermal imaging. So we'll let Will kick this puppy off and make us proud, Will.
Well, this morning I'm drinking my light roast Sumatra, which is a nice citrusy floral blend of
that was going to happen.
Good coffee beans. Straight, nothing else added into it this morning.
Fruity.
And Jake, let me go out on a limb and say you are drinking some of that H2O.
I got a little water. I got a little tea going on here, so a little flavored water. So I don't even know what my wife.
Your wife's special herbal tea.
Yeah. So that's about it. And then Ray, I'm sure it's a little whiskey and coffee, the norm.
Okay. First off, I don't drink alcohol. So you kind of put me out on the interwebs. That's the first thing here. No. So actually what I did this morning is I grabbed about 30 coffee beans from Colombia. Like I flew down there this morning. I had them in my hands this morning. I crushed them up, threw a little bit of water in it. Bam. Hold on. I had a little bit in my mouth. Yeah, no big deal. That's how you drink coffee, Jake.
Don't tell me, tell that to Will. Will's the one like with a foo-foo-y, all that stuff at his house. And I'm sure he's probably a Starbucks preferred member or something like that.
No.
I'm pretty sure he's got stock in the company at this point. Pretty positive of that.
Too rich for my blood.
Mm-hmm.
What? So I mean, we've been in our houses now for I don't even know how long. That's how long we have. What's the shows you guys are binging on? What are you guys focused on right now?
I've been watching The Last Kingdom on Netflix. That's like my kind of go-to right now. I just finished it, so I got to find a new one. So if anybody has any suggestions, let me hear them. What about you, Jake? What are you watching?
So my wife just bought a Netflix subscription about a week and a half ago.
Did you say just bought a Netflix subscription?
So we had it before, canceled it, did the Hulu thing. And I love Hulu, but maybe they'll want to sponsor us now. Who knows? But Netflix just we started watching Outer Banks. So
okay,
I thought it was like a little teen bopper little thing. Actually pretty good. So
I have to look at my phone because I am a TV show connoisseur, if you will.
Oh yeah, he's watching
Don't
Too Hot
judge
to
me.
Handle.
Don't judge me. Well,
you.
so the first thing is if you like like sci-fi or sci-fi,
Sci-fi.
that's It's a new type of
Is that like
new
an
type of show.
80s hip hop, like Fly Girls or whatever?
But if you like sci-fi, then there's a show called Legacies. Really good show. There is another show before that. I'm trying to remember the name of it. We're not going to get it on the podcast. I wish I'd have known that we were going to talk about this if I'd read things. But anyway, that's beside the point. It's a great show. So you guys should,
he can do
should
math,
watch that.
but he can't read.
I can't read. And who's the guy that played in Arrested Development? I'm talking about the actor.
Talking about Ozark with
Ozark. So if you've not seen Ozark, you've got to watch that show. Phenomenal, man. So they just had that. I mean, there's so many good shows. So I tell you what, because I failed this week, this will be I will replenish your thoughts next week with lots of really good Netflix shows that you should watch, because I don't think there's a show I probably have not seen on Netflix. Narcos. That's another good show.
I've watched it. Yep.
Yeah, it's another good show. So, all right, well, let's get into the news articles of the week. Jake, I'd love to hear what you found this week.
So really, it's kind of tying back into COVID, but just like a little health article. So university in Dublin, Ireland, and there's been studies going on, I think, with COVID and just before COVID too, of the vitamin D and how helpful it is. So this week, article published by the Trinity College in Dublin, talking about the importance of vitamin D3 and how it helps not only with bones, but also with your immune pathways. And their theory so far is, if you look at like the southern countries of Europe, northern Italy, Spain, and their death rate with COVID, being in a sunny area, how their bodies aren't absorbing that sun and converting it to D3. And then if you look at Norway, Sweden, other countries where they actually supplement with D3, their death rate. So they kind of drew a line there, and they're still teasing that out. But the importance of D3 and how it helps your immune system, especially with COVID, is their theory. A little interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a problem, right, with COVID-19, is that folks are just not getting out. Well, I mean, the majority, I believe, are going out and doing something, but there's a very large amount of folks that are absolutely not doing that. So I would like to kind of continue this one. Jake, is like over the next couple of weeks to just see how this, because we're just getting into weeks now, right, or months, of us being in this situation. So I'd be interested to see how this kind of pans out here in another month or two, to see what that looks like and what kind of health risks, because that's the thing we still don't know, right? Like, we're still in this thing. Like, we have no clue what's going to happen on the backside.
And it's interesting, right? So look, New York City, right? Highly congested area, and there's a lot of variables too that, I'm not a doctor nor scientist, but you can look at the different variables of travel, people coming in and out of the country, population growth, people living on top of each other, versus like a Florida. I mean, you have Miami and some other major metropolitan areas there, but their rates are pretty low. Texas as well. So is it that sun, that warmth, and then are people actually absorbing that, that sunlight, and is it converting to the D3 in the body, or do they need to supplement? And so they recommend 400 IUs of vitamin D3 minimum daily. So I take it. I don't know, with our nutritionists back in our old life, that was one thing that they definitely were hammering us with, was taking that D3.
Well, you're just, but you're in the tanning booth all the time. I don't understand why do you need D3? I mean, just like you're like, hey guys, like every time we call, like, hey, what are you doing, man? And really weird, the other day, when you came out and I saw you, like, when social distancing, obviously your eyes were not tanned. I don't know what.
The raccoon eyes.
Yeah, raccoon eyes. I don't like. Can you explain that? How did that happen?
Well, you put little goggles on. I mean, Ray, you act like you don't know. I mean,
you had to think for a second.
He's like, high five, like in the hallway.
He's like, I don't like you right now.
Trying to get in. So,
well, good.
Well, it's just always red.
Yeah, I'm Scotch Irish, so you can't help it. I have two colors, white and red. So,
well, that's great. Well, good. Yeah, I want to keep hearing about this one, Jake, just to kind of see where this ends up. I think that those are the hidden things that we don't understand about COVID-19 yet. So, Will, what's your article of the week, man?
So I found one. It's talking about a U.S. health giant hooked with ransomware bait. And so Magellan Healthcare, I believe is how you pronounce it, received what they believe a genuine email from a client on April 6th. 5 days later, attackers compromised the systems of the Fortune 500 company, exfiltrating records containing personal info before launching ransomware to encrypt files. So, yeah, like Ray says, if you don't know who it is, don't click it. Yeah. But, a big business like that, they thought it was one of their clients and they still got hooked. So it's shows the importance of having the preventive measures in place.
Yeah, and verify too, right? Like that's the other part. Even if you know the person or you think you know the person, just verify. The thing that's scary about that is how connected they are to the government as well. So, they're very much a provider of not just from the commercial side and the corporate side, but also the government side. So, interested to kind of see how that will continue. I've got a couple things that I want to talk about. I'm not going to dive directly into these, but these are very important, from my mindset. We talk about these every single week, and I want to make sure that everybody's kind of thinking about this, is that they're predicting one of the largest, I would say, cyber attacks here in at least the next 6 months. Like it's a lot of the experts. Again, we're us on this call. We love the idea of cybersecurity. We touch information assurance and that area, but we're not cybersecurity experts, right? So we spend a lot of time reading about it because you always want to get better at something that we do touch on every once in a while. That concerns me though that there's a chance we're going to see the biggest one, and part of the reason is it's the human factor. So for those of you that are listening to the podcast every single day, when you look at security threats, that you got to go to the lowest level, and each of you are the first line of defense. Like you are the first line. So I don't care what businesses and you put in place at home, if you are not actively defending your own networks and defending your own business as a user, you will make that business susceptible to a cyber attack. So we talk about not clicking links. We talk about, making sure you have verified the person that sent you something. Don't randomly open documents that's sent to you. No matter what kind of document it is, should you be receiving the document? Don't pay things that just don't make sense. If it's something, even if it's from your boss, ask your boss, right? Just ask to make sure. It's going to be very important over the next couple of weeks that everybody is diligent with your personal and more importantly, your business. Now, to kind of get into why I mentioned that, we have moved so much, and I'm going to ask both of you because I'm interested kind of your thought processes of this. As I read the article, the biggest concern is what we all talked about the other day, is that we're all working from home, right? Most people do not protect their own internet. They're going to put their devices in place, the routers and everything else, and they're not going to change passwords. They're very susceptible. Now you're taking a company-owned computer, you're now putting it onto a network that probably does not have as good a robust security as it should, or because you have so many people working at home now, you didn't have the devices or the equipment to give to everybody, right? So I'm interested from y'all's point, and Will, I'll start with you. Do you think that that's a concern? And how do you see from your perspective, what can businesses do now to be prepared for what we think may happen?
I definitely think it's a concern. Like you said, most home networks aren't as secure, if secure at all. I mean, you'd be surprised how many networks just in my neighborhood I could probably just hop on if I really wanted to. Yep. I think the best thing to do is have your IT person go or call each individual place and walk them through the process. Or I know some places can put together a sheet or a file that you go through, and you just like a checklist. All right, is my network hidden? Is it password protected? Is it a different password, or is it the one that the company came with the router system? Yeah. So I think it's important to definitely secure your house, because if the wrong person knows where you're at and the company you're in, it's not that hard to get into a home network if you don't take precautions.
Yeah. And we were with another company the other day. We were doing this, and I know it's weird, but it was like this online gaming thing with Zoom, and they were asking like these personal questions about the employees, and they're getting prizes at the end. What really made me nervous is that people were going into groups. So they were asking questions about like, hey, where was Will born? And again, we know this because we live in it, but it's real. So they asked that question. We go into the group, people go online, search, come back out and say, hey, this is where Will was born. So again, to me, it immediately struck me as, man, we definitely are not as protected as we think. Our networks are discoverable. Our computers are discoverable, because that's the other piece, as you were just talking about. The network's got to be, you got to protect the network, but you also got to protect the computer, right? Like there's two pieces to the puzzle here. Jake, what do you think from your standpoint? I mean, obviously you do some stuff with some corporate businesses now. What are you kind of delivering to them to help us shape, or really to help them shape their employees that are working at home?
So one of the companies is, pretty large company, 7,500 plus employees. And so, having that IT team or person, and they're global, so the internet here looks quite different than the internet in China and other places. So this is, to say, a headache or a nightmare. I don't think it's a nightmare yet, but definitely could be. But it's definitely a headache for their CISO. The discussion is basically what we're having right now. How do we protect it? They've sent out the email on the how to protect your home network. Everything Will was just talking about, and you've talked about, Ray. And then, we talked about, possibly doing pen testing on your own employees. They are excellent at cyber phishing campaigns. They actually call them phishing tournaments. So they have a very clever way of doing it and having fun, and they give out prizes to the section of the company that does the best. And so for those listening, if you're in the IT sector, come up with ways for your company to protect them, but try to have a fun way of doing it. So it's not just, yep, I got it. I'm going to report phishing on every single thing that I see phishing. Yep. Come up with a fun way, kind of a game for your employees to weed this out and to check on them. So I would take it one step further and start doing some probing.
Well, I mean, it's being proactive, right?
Yeah, being your regular employees, but your senior, a person who, let's say your average person, they might have a company computer but doesn't have a lot of access to other compartments, where someone in your C-suite has access to nearly everything. And I would test all levels in there. Senior management, low level employee to the mid-level management. So definitely do some pen testing is one recommendation I definitely give.
Yeah. And I would say, just to add to that is, companies have to invest in this, man. It's no different than, and I think employees have to invest in it also, right? It's no different than you seeking professional development to, move up in your career. You have to seek that training and development to help you be better, not just for your company, but for you personally. Things will always get worse, but you got to be proactive in what you're doing. I know, Jake, you want to say something else?
Yeah, I would look at like the severity level too. And this is kind of something we talked about too, of, workplace violence. We're not talking about someone losing their life over a breach through the internet, but you treat it almost the same way. Years ago, up till COVID, workplace violence was real, active shooters, all that training that companies are spending tons and tons of money and getting their employees to look at the signs and symptoms and how they could protect themselves from a physical attack. Now that we've shifted in this new COVID era that we don't know what's going to come out of it, look at treating your internet and putting those resources, time and energy and effort into teaching and training your employees to look for the signs and everything else, as if you were spending that money on that active shooter or workplace violence training. And I'm not saying don't keep training for the active shooter workplace violence, because eventually we will go back to work at some point. It may not be the same as what it was 2 months ago. It could be a little telecommuting and work, but treat it almost as the same.
Yeah. Well, I'm just trying to get Will to work ever. Like that would be great. I'm kidding, Will. I love you.
I know, I'm the giant anchor.
He's just like, oh yeah, this guy is heavy. No, those are all good points, and it's to me, there's a lot that goes into this, and I wanted to bring this up today just because it's you're going to hear us continue to talk about this because we have to. People are working from home, and you need to be. And listen, if you're using Zoom, Skype, whatever platform you're using, make sure it has end-to-end encryption. I cannot stress that enough. Do not download applications off the internet. Like, don't go searching for Skype and then think you're going to the right page and download it. And I know we continue to harp on this stuff, but we have to. I mean, it's our responsibility as security professionals to help you be secure. Zoom is still not 100% encrypted. Okay. Like they are working on it. We're getting way closer. There's lots of articles that are still going around. So just, be cognizant of the systems that you're using and proprietary information in meetings. I'm not telling you not to use the system. It's a great system to use. I use it every single day. But the meetings that I have are not those that I need to worry about, acquisitions or other things, or I'm putting, data out on meetings that I don't want, news to have. It's one of the favorite things that we always like to say whenever when we talk to clients is, if you're okay with the information being on the internet, you're good. Like it's not really, you don't really need security to kind of to protect it. If you don't want it to be on the internet, or you are concerned about it, or you don't want it to ruin your brand, then we really need to kind of consider it and think about it. So, Will, did you have something you wanted to add?
Oh no, I'm agreeing with you. Yeah.
Okay.
Zoom. I mean, they're trying to fix it. We're in a new world, and everybody's kind of scrambling to get everything locked down how it should be. So, and
I think they will. Like again, I'm not
a matter of time.
Yeah, and I don't want to push away from the company. Just continue to do due diligence like we do. That's if you ask me what we do as security professionals, is that our job is due diligence, the best way to do it, and we will review and look all the way through to find all the holes, right? So today we really wanted to get into like thermal imaging, like that's really what today's discussion is way more into. I want to give you kind of the overview of where thermal imaging began, and then I'm going to kind of kick it to Will and Jake to kind of talk about the particulars of what they've researched and kind of talk about. So thermal imaging is not new. The military and the corporate space has been using it for decades. This is one of the things that, at night you wanted the ability to detect heat, right? You wanted to be able to see things. So there's some really good companies out there. FLIR Systems is one. That's definitely one that the government or the military uses a lot, that have spent a lot of time and resources creating cameras. And I don't just mean cameras. I mean cameras. Like we're talking top end. They're expensive, but again, you get what you pay for. They're expensive, but they are phenomenal cameras that, for us overseas, when we deploy, I remember putting cameras in, and 10 years later, those cameras still working. I mean, that to me is remarkable. And they've went through heat, they went through cold, they went through dust storms, they went through like every type of element that you could imagine, and they still just work. So that's kind of what thermal imaging is about, right? Kind of to see heat. So the real question that I want to kind of start this off with, and I'm going to throw it over to you, Jake, is how accurate do you believe thermal imaging will be to be able to read somebody's temperature associated with COVID-19? So if businesses are looking for ways to identify that, hey, there's 10 people walking by, one of those people has, elevated temperature, how accurate do you think that's going to be?
Depends on the process. So if you're going through like a cattle chute, right, you need time in between, versus if you did 1-by-1 hand scanner type checks, or a system that's on a tripod and someone stands in front of it. So if you're looking at some of the higher end companies with, they talk in Kelvin for the degrees of temperature and millikelvin. When you're looking at a product, you want to look at a product that has a millikelvin. The lower the number that it can detect, the better off that product is. And then how are you scanning? Are you doing the forehead? Is the person wearing glasses? Are they wearing a baseball hat? Is it in a glass room surrounding where there's reflection coming off? And then you also got to look at the average. So if you are living in Texas right now, in South Texas, where it's 100 degrees, and you walk in from your car into the scan area, well, your body temperature is going to be hotter than someone living up in Minneapolis, where it's still cold. And I mean, shoot, the Northeast last week was having a snowstorm over the weekend. So that body temperature is going to vary. So you have to have a random sample size of, let's say, 10 people. And now you have your delta at that point.
Yeah. Well, no, you bring up some good things. And the point with all of this is that right now, thermal imaging is seeing an incredible boom for an industry. I mean, it is. I did not realize. We had all kind of talked about doing this show because I had gotten somebody had talked to me about it, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, that's something that we've done in the past, right, in other countries, and let me do some research. And what I did not realize is how many people are focused on this. And one of those is Athena Security. They recently launched a fever detection COVID-19 screening system. So the interesting part of this is, the normal person is about 37 Celsius, right? So for them, 40 is kind of that delta. So that 40 is where if your temperature is over 40, somebody needs to kind of check on you, right? Because you have some sort of fever or something's kind of happening there. Again, locations dependent. I do agree with that. I think there's definitely some questions about if I go out for, a 10-mile run and then I come back, what's my temperature going to be? Obviously temperature, but those are the particulars that I don't understand well. But you to me said the most important part of this, which is do research and understand the systems. Like that is like vital. Will, do you see this becoming? I mean, it's already becoming a thing, but what do you see the FDA and your Department of Homeland Security and all of these organizations doing with this? I mean, do you see us moving towards this quick?
I think we are going to move forward. I mean, there's already like a lot of Asian countries and sort of some of the Eastern European countries are starting to implement these already in their airports. Yeah. One thing I want to comment on what Jake said is the system has a lot to do with it. Like I know doing my research and the accuracy, I had one system that was claiming they can be within a half a degree accurate, and another one saying plus or minus 2 degrees. So it's important that you do your research and I mean that's a pretty big difference, right?
No, it is.
Even a half degree.
Even a half degree could be big.
That's right, man.
Yeah.
And then the difference too, Will, if you measure someone's forehead versus their eye duct, you're roughly a degree and a half off, so where are you measuring that person's temperature and who's measuring it and how are they doing it? Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Keep going, Will.
Oh, no, you're good. So, but I mean, I think it's important to do your research, like you're saying, and know the system and the FDA. I don't know how, I think one of the systems I researched, I think they claim that they are FDA approved. I really don't understand.
Yeah, I don't understand that, like the correlation.
I mean, maybe Jake knows. I don't know.
So the FDA, it's called a 510K approval, which is a pre-approval. So it means basically the FDA has researched or looked at your product and everything you're stating for your product. The FDA gives us pre-approval, basically saying that your product falls in line with what you said it'll do. I think we need to be very clear with our listeners and our viewers that the thermal imaging, the FLIRs, and the other technologies that are out there, it is not going to detect COVID. It's just going to detect a rise in temperature or loss of temperature.
Yeah.
There is nothing out there right now that is detecting COVID. All they are doing is looking at, thermal imaging is nothing more than detecting heat. And so that is, what we're talking about, those systems to detect that heat, because the fever and what is being told right now is what's going on with COVID. That elevated fever along with other signs and symptoms. That's what they're telling employees and everyone else to look for. I was just at the hospital at the ENT doc. And they had a little table out there, and the nurse techs are out there with a little, your little handheld thermometer against the forehead, mask, gloves, and everything else. And that's, another, we can have this discussion kind of leading into how does that look? What does that roadmap back to work look like for, a small company or a large global company with multiple offices and a shared office space in a high-rise building? How does that look like?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's those are all good points. And what's even a better point is that Will just left and his cat was giving me the googly eyes. That was super awkward. If y'all could have just like saw the cat was like, meow, like, okay, maybe it wasn't. Okay, we'll get back to it. Sorry.
So one thing I think that how they're going to implement this, right, is they're going to set it up at entrance points, like Jake say, kind of like a cattle street. You go to the airport, they have the security check-ins. I foresee them going to have a security check-in. They're going to have, as you're walking through that, they're also going to have the thermometer system set up. I know one of the systems I looked up, a research was they do the glass doors for the entry glass doors, right? And so I foresee them putting up this system to check the temperatures, and they're going to have a set limit. And if you're over I'm sure over, not under that limit, they're probably going to get if you have a metal detector, right? Ding. And then they're going to pull you to secondary, and then they're going to start talking to you and maybe actually do a more accurate thermal temperature check, right? So that's kind of where I see it going as far as entries and stuff like that.
Yeah, so we know it's happening over in Wuhan, right? They, I know they've got in some transportation hubs. I know, I believe Will, you just mentioned this when inside of the Asian countries. So for them, it's more of a camera that is reading multiple people at the same time. So if you look at a FLIR, the way the FLIR works You're not centralized on a person, right? You can read a group up to like 50 people. And it's kind of like if anybody has seen, drone footage or anything else, it puts like a box around them. Well, what you have the ability to do with like the FLIR and some of these devices is you can put the temperature reading. So you can say that, it sends it out and comes back and says, hey, that temperature is, 37.6 degrees or whatever the case may be. I see that being a little bit more common to start with. And this is why a lot of these cameras have facial recognition that are part of it, right? Like I see a legal and a personal problem coming very quickly with all of this. Like I just know it is. And Jake, I'm about to kick it to you to see what you think of this, but I just see a problem with setting up these individual like camera systems that read temperature and do all these things that somebody's going to walk up to, because I don't think people are going to be okay with it, man. I think a lot of these groups are not going to understand the benefits. But then the other side of it is how far are companies going to take it? I wish everybody would do the right thing and say, hey, let's just check temperature because that's what we care about. But the reality is I think it's going to push further to the left. I think they're going to be recording stuff. I think they're going to be doing facial recognition. I think they're going to want to know what your name is. That way, if you're walking by, they have the ability to, what do you think of that, Jake? What kind of issues do you see coming in that space?
So I think you hit it on the head, the personal privacy. People, I know that, look, I'm not going to give you my full name or, if it's, there's so many aspects to this that, and variables that it's company dependent, and what I recommend is like creating a return to work committee, you're with your security director, your senior management, your IT guy, your safety personnel, legal, human resources. You're also, if you're a union company, like a Tyson's Foods, like get the union reps involved, your internal communications team, so I mean, how often do you check? Do you just check in the morning when they come in? Do you check at the beginning? Do you check, throughout their shift? What about the copy machine? I mean, you're talking social distancing. How do you get everyone socially distanced walking through the scanner at the same time? If you do an individual, how much time is that going to take? Do you do it in the parking lot before they come in? Or do you do it in their car? I mean, there are so many, variables to this. What if high-rise building and there's 6 different entrances, and your company has 3 floors and another company has part of a floor? Can you shut down all the entrances and just use one? Or is that a fire code safety violation? What about a marshaling area? I mean, there are so many things that this plan, when companies begin to do this, they need to look, it's a detailed plan, and it's not something that you can just put together overnight. I mean, I'm talking a week-long discussion of ironing out every single little detail, including the legal aspect that you're mentioning, Ray. I guarantee you we're going to see court cases. I think, Will, you sent me something yesterday about a little off topic, but similar, of the government being able to look at your web search history. People are up in arms about that. So.
But it didn't pass though, right? Like I thought it failed by like one. I thought it failed by like one vote is what I thought it was.
The article I saw said that it passed.
Okay, yeah, I thought it failed by a couple votes because of the.
But that's
people
your
not
web
showing
history. That's just your web history, right?
Yeah,
we're talking personal, in your face. So I think there's a difference, and you're going to see people who are like, I have rights. Yeah.
So here's an interesting. So I want to read this because I think it's important, and then I'll quote where it's from. So the Privacy Concern Electronic Frontier Foundation, right? They published basically a statement on thermal cameras calling into question the accuracy of the technology, which we all just talked about, a percentage versus 2 or, however much, and arguing their surveillance infrastructure being built up now might become permanent if the virus goes away. So after 9/11, we got the Patriot Act, right? That's what Matthew, I don't want to say his name because I don't know how to say it properly, but he's a policy analyst with the EFF. A lot of time, example of that because of an ongoing problem, because there's no reason why this kind of technology would need to stick around after the COVID-19 crisis is over. So the point that he's making is the point that we're all making here. there is validity in doing anything you can to mitigate a threat, right? COVID-19 is absolutely, it's a risk, it's a threat, and it's a vulnerability to a company. Mitigating that makes absolute sense. You take then what Jake just said, you lay that down, but just make sure that when you're mitigating the threat that or the risk, or whatever the case may be, that you're not allowing it to go overboard. Meaning, if you're just doing temperature because that makes sense, right? Like, you want to make sure, but is it the only way to mitigate the spread of this? I mean, Will, what do you think? Is this the only way that we can fix this, is by having a camera that can tell me that your beard is going gray?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm very kind of touchy about this, right?
Good. I like it.
If you give up your freedom for security,
Will being touchy,
you get nothing. You have neither, right? So, yeah, I'm very, I don't know. It's rubbed off. My dad's kind of a conspiracy theory, black helicopters falling around type guy. Right? So, it's rubbed off on me a little bit at my old age, almost as gray as you are now, Ray. But
no gray, nowhere.
It's just for men. I know. I got it.
No, I just it's so I wanted to look, distinguished. I call it distinguished, not gray. Go ahead, Will.
Okay. But viruses are always going to be around. You're never going to eradicate viruses totally. So if you're worried about fevers, right now we're in a pandemic. In a year from now, people are still going to be sick. You're still going to go to work because you have that obligation to yourself, to your company. And I think that mentality needs to change more than perhaps maybe putting cameras up. If the problem is, there will be people who take advantage of it, of course, just like there's going to be corporations who take advantage of these cameras in place. They're going to record the information. And anyways,
well, let's talk about that. This is good. I like it when we get into these juicy conversations. So there's a couple things I would say to your. So look, man, the listeners are going to get so much today, but there's some stuff I would say to your piece of this. This is not like a normal everyday pandemic. It's just not. And here's why. Here's why it's not like any normal thing. The infection rate, right, being able to spread this thing is much worse than anything that we've seen. So that's number one. Number two, we still don't know anything about it. Number three, we have no cure, right? We have no idea how to
for the common cold or the flu.
We have no idea how to appropriately do. What we do know, Will, is this: is when we did not, lock down. And I'm not gonna say lock down because I don't like the fact that I have to be in my house, like all of these things. But we know when people were living their daily lives that there was a crazy amount of people dying. Like, we knew that, right? So I sit to myself and I say, okay, hey, if the normal flu kills, lots of people, man, like, this is not, this is nothing out of the norm. But with the normal flu, you don't do any lockdowns. People are still touching each other. We're still doing it. We go to the doctor, we get pills, we get whatever the cure is for it, which is basically just having it, and then you're kind of going away. But you don't have to worry about some of the side effects. But then you have this thing where if you have large groups of people together, we've seen, mass hysteria, and you've seen just a large amount of deaths.
And Ray, I think to your point, your point number two is we don't know.
Yeah.
No one knew
everything
in December, January, February, March. And so we've had this time, the initial stay-at-home orders. It gave the experts time. And now what I see, especially in our country, is a divide. On one side is if you wear a mask and gloves, you're a sheep. And if you don't do it, well, then, you're standing up for your liberties and your freedom. And I think there's a lot of people who are in between, is COVID real? Yes, it is. Is it a threat? Yes, it is. Is it as big as we're making it out to be?
Probably
I don't know. And no one does. Yeah. If you look at the flu and the numbers, they're somewhat similar. The problem is we don't know. And so I think that's the biggest thing. And that's why for the first 4 to 6 weeks, everyone was fine. Okay, hey, you know what? We're going to pull back and we're going to sit at home. And as we're finding out more and more, and you're going to have doctors and scientists on both sides of the spectrum, right? You'll have one doctor who will say, look, we should never quarantine the healthy. And you'll have another doctor says, oh no, quarantine because we don't want to, burn the hospitals, burn the system and everything else. And then we look at the numbers too. You know, the numbers for a while was there's cases of being reported. And again, this is the news media. So we need to take everything almost with a grain of salt, because what are they pushing on both sides? But our hospitals truly reporting.
Statistics though, numbers don't lie. Like that's the important part.
Numbers don't lie, but people do.
Well, but it's not about the people. It's like, to me, this is a numbers game.
You can work the numbers. You can work.
It's a clean data system. You know,
that's right.
You know, so numbers don't lie if it's clean data. If it's obscure data and there's other, then the numbers aren't going to tell the full truth. So, you know, our hospitals truly reporting that a COVID death as truly COVID, or did they die of heart disease, cancer, something else? And because the hospital administrator now has, you know, an ethical dilemma. Do I lay off people, or do I take this extra money that the federal government's going to give me because we label it as COVID? We put someone on a respirator for X amount of time, we get a little extra money. And so there's this quandary going on, at least in our country. I don't know about other countries, but in our country of, and I think people are, is it truly COVID? Is it not? And again, it goes back to the fear. No one truly knows. And until we figure out, it could just be another case of the flu. We don't get tested for the flu every year. We get a flu vaccine, and less than half the country actually gets a vaccine.
Yeah. And all of this, I mean, this is a great conversation. I think the point that I'm trying to make here is this. We know we don't know about it, right? We don't have a cure. So companies have to put something in place to protect their employees. That's their responsibility. My responsibility from a manager of employees is to make sure I do everything I can to protect them. Now, I have to do something, right? I don't see these cameras as, you know, or these things that we're talking about, you know, thermal imaging, as being a bad thing, as long as it's used appropriately, right? Again, it's about, if you're taking temperature, that's what you're focused on. I'm using it in a company space. I have gotten the permission of my employees, right? Because I've sat down with them. I've explained to them, listen, the reason that we're doing this is not because we're going to, it's almost like getting an Article 15 in the military, or getting, you know, adverse, whatever you want to call it. Like, you get in trouble, right? HR side. Sorry, I was going there and then I lost my thought. But you get in trouble HR side, you're not going to put that on the internet or share that with other people. It's the same thing with this. It's a medical piece. So, but you want to be able to identify. I just know that right now we don't know enough. So companies have to figure it out. And listen, and we're opening things. You know, we are starting to open the doors, man. Like, it is absolutely happening. We're going to know in 2 weeks, right? Like, it's going to be very clear in 2 weeks. We will have a pretty good understanding if this thing is as serious as we think it is, because, you know, Georgia's open. There's a couple other states that are open. Texas is open, right? Like, they're starting to go.
Wisconsin now.
Yeah, Wisconsin. So I think we will know, because if those numbers, even if they have inflated numbers right now, that to me is, yes, that's important. But if those inflated numbers inflate even more, like they just start going up, then again, we've got to come back and look at these technologies to say, hey, man, how do we identify somebody who has COVID-19 so we can help them? And then the problem, though, is how do you help them, you know, other than quarantining them? And
I think, you're saying a proactive approach. You know, businesses have to open.
I don't want to listen. I don't want to be quarantined. I mean, that's the whole point. I don't want to be sitting in my house, because I'm perfectly fine, right? Because since the beginning of this, I've been in here. But I also realize that if I went out and you know, hope this doesn't happen, if for some reason I got COVID-19, I would understand that I've got to quarantine myself, right? Because if I don't, I'm going to spread it. And you mentioned it a second ago. You've got to do one of the two things. You either quarantine those that are sick, but we can't identify them. We don't know how to know if they have it. So the only resource that any sane person would look at this and just go, man, this is stupid. But I mean, how do you do it until you have identification? And I think these systems may be it. So sorry. I mean, this is a good conversation, Will. Thank you for bringing that up, man, because I know there's lots of folks that are, and I'm constantly in my mind, man, going back and forth about civil liberties and like all of that.
Well, that's the dilemma with any technology, though, right? Is if it's used appropriately and properly, then it's okay. But not everybody has our same views and morals and standards.
I agree.
And I think that's the dilemma with any, especially new technology.
I agree.
And so, you know, you have to weigh, you know, checks and balances, weigh it out. And do you really trust the people who are in charge to do the right thing at all times? And, you know, I guess
And I think a government versus a business are you can kind of separate those two as well, you know?
Yeah.
And I think we're talking.
You can, but you have to. We're dealing with it right now. Like, you got to read the fine print in the contracts, man, because it's like going to a website and signing up. The terms of service tells, hey, Jake, just want to let you know, man, hey, we're going to be selling your information all over the internet. Well, Jake didn't read the terms of service because, like, look, man, I wanted to go to, cupcakes.com because I love cupcakes, so I think that's part of it. Yeah. I mean, like, who doesn't love cupcakes, right?
But no, I think having that return to work committee of all those department heads of everything you can think of.
Well, and now's the time too. Like, don't wait until you're 2 days to open your business. I think that's the whole point of this, is that there's lots of opportunities. Do it now. Create that committee. And
then if you are going to use a FLIR type system or a thermal imaging type system, I mean, a lot of them, FLIR for right now is 48 weeks back order.
Oh yeah, man. Absolutely.
And then the amount of money that you're going to spend on a handheld camera varies between the quality between a few $100s up to $40,000. And so, that's FLIR. A lot of these companies are having backlog issues because this is the way most companies are going through. It's what they feel is the correct response to preventing the spread of this. And so this isn't something that, and I think most companies have been looking at this the last few weeks, I don't want to call it a downtime, but it's a time to kind of take a step back, refocus, look at, identify what the problem is and how are we going to mitigate that problem and get people back to work. But if you haven't thought about it, or you're just now beginning to think about it, you need to hurry up and catch up, to the rest of the pack, because you may not be able to open up your company or your workplace because you may not have either the right processes in place or the right equipment to open it up.
And my biggest thing is, though, right? You could have this for up to 2 weeks without showing any symptoms.
Yes, Tupac lives. Will, we know it.
I know. I'm just saying.
Are you a Tupac or Biggie fan, though? I'm just.
I think I like Biggie.
They're both alive. I mean, come on, and Elvis, man. Elvis.
I like Biggie better, but that's not here or there. But I'm just, there's a lot of people out there who are asymptomatic or not showing the same symptoms.
That's right.
You can have it for up to 2 weeks. So, if that's where personal accountability should come in. If you don't feel good, if you have a fever, don't go out, don't go to work. And that's where it falls back on corporations and businesses to say, hey, listen, right now, especially if you don't feel good, if you have a fever, don't come in. We're going to give you the sick time. Don't feel obligated. Work from home. We've been doing it for the last 2 months now. Obviously, most places can do it. And so I think you have to balance the personal accountability with this technology. And
no, I completely agree, man. And
what if you've been laid off for 6 weeks?
Yeah, I mean,
I get it. I get it.
You're not feeling good, but you feel good enough.
It's a hard problem, man.
And now you've got your measly, let's say $1,200. Maybe you're lucky and you got $4,000 for your family. That paid for maybe a month of bills, probably not.
But if you have a fever, you're not going to be able to work anyways.
You can probably work.
If they have this technology.
I mean,
construction industry is not going to have this technology unless they're out there with their handheld thermometers doing it. They're not going to have this type of stuff. This is more for big corporations, airports, access control point stuff, right? Of what we're talking about. Your day laborers, God love them, we need them. They're not going to be going through access control points like this. That's where it's going to fall on the foreman or whatever to have their thermometers out and check them that way.
Yeah, I don't disagree with and we're gonna move this on just because we will literally be here for the next 30 minutes on this. I agree with everything you're saying, Will. That's the uniqueness of this is we have a problem and we have to trust something to give us the facts. And I think that's the whole point here. We still don't know how to do that. And I know we'll continue to kind of talk about this subject. One of the things I do want to talk about, though, is the access control piece of this, right? So take the thermal imaging kind of out and just think about the businesses from a bigger perspective. Businesses are starting to open. So there's a really important piece here that as you open, you want to make sure you have cleared zones and uncleared zones, right? You have the ability to where, businesses are just kind of allowing people to walk all through their businesses. They need to start looking at how they're implementing their access control internal to their building. Will, what is your thoughts on how do you do that to protect your employees? Because again, that's what it's about. How do I protect my employees? How do I identify those that may have COVID-19, right? but more importantly, make sure that I'm not inadvertently helping the spread if this thing continues with what we believe it is.
So for like Jake said, you definitely want to have your return to work team, but I think you need to implement policies and procedures, SOPs, whatever you want to call them, to where they're practicing at a minimum 6 to 8 feet social distancing prior to entering. Then you have you go from red, yellow, green zones, right? Yeah, the red zone, which is unknown, yellow zone, which is testing, green zone, you're clear to go, right? And you got to set up the zones. And so the red zone is when they enter in, the yellow zone is when they're testing, and then you're either going to go secondary to confirm or deny, or you go to green because you've passed the test, right? And I think that's kind of the best way to do it for large corporations.
Kind of like an airport. I mean,
exactly.
when you think about it, because it's kind of what it is. It's you're red, you go through the yellow, you go through your checks, right? And then green on the other side, you're kind of good to go.
And I think that's kind of the blueprint that most places will have to use until we figure out what's going on with this. Now, the problem is when you go to like retail stores, open air stores, that's when you have you're going to have a harder time to protect your people. So that's why I know most of the stores around here have the glass things or the plastic in front of you. They're not talking to you. They have the mask on, mask and gloves and stuff like that. And that's kind of the best way to protect them at the moment until we figure out.
Well, I think also though, like a mall, when I think of a mall, like it's the property owner's responsibility as well, right? Again, it's just like everybody taking responsibility and wanting to be part of the solution. And you said it earlier, like that to me is everything. Don't put it on, Bob's, bait and tackle shop, to be the only guy when you have like 1,000 stores inside of your building, because there is and everything that we talk about from a security standpoint is the further I can push it out to detect, right? Like I got to detect. That's like the important part of the piece. The other thing I would tell you because I need people to think about this. This is super important because I've been having multiple conversations about this and people are not talking about this. You have to have a separate exit from the entrance. So if your company has people entering and exiting the same location, you have to change the way you think. So if you take what Will just said, we are not giving you the idea on this show right now that this is exactly how you need to do it. No, like that's what we do. We dissect. Every company's different. There's different processes. I think that's really what you said to me, which was the bigger part of this. Put processes and procedures in place to protect your employees. But the bigger part of that is to make sure that your clear zone is exiting out a different location so that you're not inadvertently having people cross the same threshold, and then people coming back into the exit or the entrance and they're passing it. So Jake, I want to throw that over to you. How do you implement from your perspective, obviously, with some of the companies you're dealing with right now, how are you helping them kind of implement or think about implementing access control as it deals with, COVID-19, thermal imaging and that stuff?
So I would look at like a roadmap to return to work. You got to create a strategy by looking at all aspects of your company. Yeah. So you're looking at your facilities and people first. So you got to ID what needs to be protected. And you look at that access control to the people and to your facilities. And then, step 2 would be reviewing your policies and procedures. How are people going through that? What risk assessments are you doing? What's your safety plan? What's your communications plan? What's your occupancy guidelines? How are you going to screen your employees? And then it goes back to your exposure. And then I look at like a step 3 almost as a system adaptation. You're looking, and if you notice in each one of these points I'm making, I'm talking about access control nearly every single time. So you're looking at your access control, your entrance exit management. And then I think the 4th point is you're going to explore those solutions. Where are you vulnerable? What weaknesses do you have, and how can you mitigate those? And again, that usually leads to access control, like you just said, right? In security, the further you can push that threat out, the better off you are. And so that's kind of how I've been recommending to the companies is, create that strategy by looking. I don't like the term holistic, but all aspects of that company. From the people to the product to your policies to what systems you currently have, and then where are you deficient, and make that through. Every point you both are making, we've had those discussions of multiple entrances, shutting them down, one entry, one exit, safe zone, a screening zone, and then the talk becomes of PPE.
That's right.
Are you going to provide gloves and mask?
That's right.
Is gloves and mask enough? Do you need to,
Yeah.
because it can get through your
tear ducts,
your eye ducts, your tear ducts. So now are you going to do a full mask, or are you going to do clear glasses? Is that required? Is it not? Do you have the employee do that? Can you make the employee do it? It goes back to the legalese of everything. Right. I mean, there's just so much. And then let's talk about the copy room.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a cleanliness. I mean, it's cleanliness in general. We don't. Again, there's so much you don't know.
So that social distancing, the cleaning everything. How often is it clean? Are you going to have to up your cleaning crew?
No, completely agree. So what I would say with all of this is listen. Today was a good discussion, and you're going to start to see a lot more of these laser pointed discussions from us, because we're, the thing I love about security in general, it's one of those things where I don't believe there's truly experts, because we are always learning, right? Because the threat is ever evolving, and so do we. So the great part about this group and the folks that we bring on this show is that we all have different opinions and we all see the world differently. The end state, though, is that we keep the asset, protecting that asset as our top line requirement. And if you're a business owner or you provide security for folks, if you're a business owner, you need to get security consultants to help you with this problem now. Do not wait until this thing's already here. And if you're a security guy or gal inside of a company, get a security consultant to come in and help you. Having a third eye to help you to make your security better as you're working through this is super important. And again, it doesn't need to be a team of like 15,000 people. No, find one or two folks that you can bounce ideas off of, because this is not going to be an easy fix until we have the cure, right? Until we have something that, like, until then, to me, that this is not going to go away. Like, this is going to continue to kind of be here. And companies have to make the decision: how many folks do we really need to come into work? How many can stay working at home? What is our threshold for allowance of the risk that we're going to open up to do this? As far as using the thermal technology, it's on you, right? Like, do your research, due diligence. It's everything that we've been talking about this whole thing. We're not here to sway you one way or the other, but just know that you need to do due diligence. You need to read it. You need to understand it. You need to look at the contract. I know as a security guy, I'm sure, like, I see they're both going to shake their head when I say this. The thing that I hate to do is read contracts about, just in general. I hate reading them. Like, it's like the same legal jargon over and over and over again, but it is so important right now. And Will brings up a good point from his standpoint of not liking people, conspiracy theorists and that whole kind of mentality is that you want to be a private person, man. You don't want people in your stuff. So if you're not reading those contracts, you better start now, because you never know what's going to be coming with folks that may or may not be doing the stuff that they're doing for the right reason. So this has been a really good episode. It's probably the best one that I've had an opportunity to be on with you guys, because there was emotion on this one. And I know that we all think, a little bit differently about where we are, but that's the good news. That's why we make a good team for this podcast. It's also why we're going to make have good folks coming in here, because you want that individuality whenever you're talking about security, because it's not it is a team sport. One individual cannot do it. Law enforcement knows that. Will knows that, right? You can't just have one person out there doing this thing. It ain't going to work well. All it takes is one bad situation, and you wish you had people around you. Same thing with the military and everything else we do. So this week, thank you everybody for coming and listening. We've got some really exciting stuff coming up. Will's going to be releasing some of it. We've been recording the last couple episodes, so we're going to give an opportunity for folks to be able to start watching that here, I think, in the next maybe month or so. So that'll be a good piece of it. The other pieces is we're also going to give people the opportunity to listen to the podcast a little bit sooner. So again, that's going to be probably a couple weeks away, and we're going to continue to develop these things as time goes on. Will, where can they find us? Like, where do they need to go to link up with us?
So you just got to go to coffeesquadpodcast.com, and that'll give you all the platforms that you can listen to us on, or you can go to our Facebook page, just search Coffee Squad Podcast. Just go ahead and give us a like, follow, subscribe to our podcast. Let us know any questions or comments.
Yeah, and give us a review.
What you want to talk about? Yeah.
Give us a review, and you can put it on the review. Hey, We love Ray because he's the best one on the pod. You can say it. Like, these guys are going to get their feelings hurt. Like, look, Jake's like, Jake already knows, man. He just tried to quit trying to hand me money underneath the table. But more importantly, like, give us reviews because it helps us make the show better, right? Like, we want to provide the best content as possible and help with security issues. Jake, I just like to say his name to just see his face. He just like looks at me. I'm waiting for him to take off his hat. But anyway, thank you. Thanks again, everybody, for visiting episode 11. Again, 10+1 Security Management Coffee Squad. We will see you next week.
Ciao.
Have a good one. Thank you.